service lines that don't seem to want to go away. And so our guest speaker today is Jason Weller from Ooma.
Great. Thanks, Dan, Paul, and the Abilita team, Chris, and everyone. Appreciate it. It's been a number of years since we've been doing business together, and it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be here for the first one with everyone. And I've been with Ooma almost 3 years, and we have a great product that we're going to kind of highlight today for is what you saw the title of this webinar being the POTS transformation. So that's what we're going to kind of highlight and go through. And again, if you have questions, by all means, please stop me, ask me. I'll take a breath. This is our 21st year in business with Ooma. So if you see in the first bullet point, as we say, we were born in the cloud in 2004. So coming up on our 21st year here in 2025. And we were built on a UC platform. So the Unified Communications platform, we own our switches and our gear and all the data centers throughout the globe that we have. We have all the voice products, and we do voice well, as I say. So SIP, Teams direct routing, and POTS replacement that we're going to be talking about here. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley, so Sunnyvale to be specific, where all the tech companies are. But I have two offices over in the West Coast in California. One in Vancouver, so north of the Pacific Northwest, and then another one down in South Florida in Boca Raton. And I like to highlight that because all of our customer service and support is 24 by 7 by 365 North American based. So any one of our call centers that I mentioned in those offices kind of have the follow the sun model. So whether it's coming out of Michigan, Eastern time zone, or California, the Pacific time zone, those calls get routed throughout the day, basically by time of day. So if it is something in the Eastern time zone, it'll go down to Boca or even to Vancouver, or if it's more in the Western time zone, obviously to the two California offices. One of the nice feather in our cap, we're publicly traded, as you see on the New York Stock Exchange, company name Ooma, OOMA. We have 2.5 million users that touch our network each and every day, which makes us one of the largest UC companies in the entire globe. The next one is actually huge. 11 years running, we've been voted by PC Magazine. And PC Magazine is an organization that actually goes right to what I say, the horse's mouth, the end user, the customer. But for 11 years running, we've been voted the #1 IP phone company in the entire globe as well, which is a huge feather in our cap for that. What makes up Ooma? About 1,050 plus employees. A very small percentage of those are contractors throughout the entire country and globe as well. And those contractors do help us with installations that we do throughout the entire organization. So I kind of like to highlight this slide because it shows the history, 21 years in business, the offices and North American, 100% North American support that we have, publicly traded, the traffic, the number of users that we have, and then the accolade of, PC Magazine for 11 years running. I'll take a quick breath. Any questions on that from anyone that I've highlighted here? All right, we'll keep rocking and rolling here. So what are we talking about today? The copper sunset. Beautiful, sunset there going over the mountains of what's being done. So the public switch telephone network, the PSTN, right? Our industry is filled with acronyms. It's headed toward an inevitable sunset. So back in 2019, you see the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, came down with an order that said, we've been hearing about this if you've been in this industry for a number of years, for almost a decade now. AT&T is going to get rid of POTS lines. AT&T is going to, and this is back in, early, to mid 2000s. Well, it got pushed by the federal government, got pushed. Well, it's not pushed anymore. We're in it. We're about, 3.5 years in, give or take, since when it all went into effect. And Ooma, having the mind share and the great engineering team that we do, came out with a product here just over 3 years ago to bring it to market that we'll kind of highlight here. So, and I'll kind of talk about why and what the deregulation means here with the copper sunset. So as we talked about, the FCC came down and allowed all the LECs. Mainly we hear of AT&T, right? If in here specifically in Michigan, but throughout the country, there's other LECs that are involved in this with the rates that have no caps. They're uncapped, so they can take that $30 analog line charge with an AT&T product and say, hey, we're now going to charge 300 or 1,000 or 1,500. I've seen bills, for $2,000 for a single line for an elevator or for a fax for an organization out there. That copper that, here specifically in the Midwest, Michigan specifically, right, is deteriorating. So, water, the elements, the snow, the winter, the cold weather, the freezing, the frost that we have here in Michigan specifically, that last mile that's out there is, really, really deteriorating. Or let's just say that green box outside of your business, animals, squirrels, chipmunks get in there and chew at that, and cause havoc for, whether it's a airy phone conversation or a staticky conversation. How many times does that happen over your time? So, and the per line costs are going up exponentially, as I mentioned. And the traditional LECs are deprioritizing repairs because they've laid off, or those technicians over the years, I'll call them the crafty veterans, really knew how to manage and facilitate and repair those lines. Well, now, they've allowed early retirements, and those guys don't. The new recruits coming in don't know how to work on that like the experienced crafty veterans that I mentioned did. Costs aren't necessarily protected by master agreements anymore because either they're out of contract, they're not in they're coming up on contract, and they won't even renegotiate on a new contract moving forward, and they're just saying, sorry, you have to move on, you have to find another solution. So what have we done for this? Here's an example of a customer from this last summer. July of 2023, their bill was, 1,500 per month and went to 13,000 per month. And this is a customer we won here in the Midwest, and that's a copy of their actually bill. They're out of Minnesota, I can tell you that. And the customer just fell off their chair, and thankfully, one of our partners, was in there, and we negotiated an agreement with our Ooma air dial that we're going to highlight here for the POTS replacement. That's exactly what's going on out there today. I'll take a quick breath. Any questions, comments so far?
Yeah, I know, Jason, at least what we have seen is the pricing is all over the place. It's over $3 for a local call. Um, we've seen different contracts that are in there. And then, kind of talking about AT&T and CenturyLink and Frontier, really it's all over the place. And I guess, a lot of these lines are just kind of out there that people have forgotten, right? But now you have to do something about it.
Absolutely, Dan. Yeah, and here's one of the things that I'll kind of talk about too is, there's the different initiatives that every organization has, whether it's, something to do with updating a server or, a computer or equipment for the warehouse or for the office. These costs are being gobbled up, by these analog lines, and it's handcuffing the business, with, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to move forward? Because this, $200 line is now $2,000. Well, there's other initiatives that we have within the company that we have to pause, we have to put on hold. So one of the positives of looking at what we offer with Ooma is you can still do those within your organization. We can help with the bottom line on these analog lines because they are an important line, especially in the fire life safety space with, the emergency lines, the elevators, the fire panels, the security panels, the door entries. We really have we've honed in this market with this product. So we've monitored this with the FCC wireline notices over the last year, and you can see the increases in these notices from Q1 to Q4. It's gone up, 3, 4, 5 times since this past year. And we've seen that specifically here in the Midwest, but also throughout the country as well, because of these rate centers, these central offices that are being shut down or closed with 30-day notices. Sometimes they don't even give them a notice. They just all of a sudden just say, sorry, we throw our hands up in the air. There's nothing you can do. But AT&T, is to ditch the old copper lines, for most areas. How will you be impacted? What does that do for you? A lot of times in the UC space, the unified communication space, a lot of carriers don't have a solution, but that's what's unique with us with Ooma is we do because we saw the writing on the wall back in the early 2020 and developed this product that we're going to talk about. The discontinuation of certain business lines, POTS, plain old telephone service, right? Is just going away. As copper retirement accelerates, customers feel the pain of this POTS transformation. And that's Verizon, and they're in this space as well in the obviously the cellular world. And a wireless is apparently the new copper, and that's Channel Futures. That's a big organization, obviously, in this channel that we all work with from the provider world. That actually will all be at a lot of us will be at the show out in Vegas here in the next few weeks. But yeah, just the increase in those wireline notices that you see have just really, really transformed over from this past year into this year. So as I was talking about, initiatives for your business, what are your plans for the copper line serving your fire, your life safety environments? It's the strategy. So we did a survey, that we went through the Foundry research. You see marketed polls down below, but the strategy moving forward, given the decommission of POTS. So the top, two you see there is we're researching potential replacement solutions. So that's the big one, and we're evaluating different vendors. And, Ooma is not the only game in town. I am, I'll say, I am, a big fan of Ooma because I think we really have honed in this market with this product that we'll kind of highlight here in a minute. But there are other options out there. Customers, what you can do as a customer. We have selected an alternative solution. So maybe it is with the fire panel company. They put in an updated fire panel equipment for a big expense. We plan to continue the analog lines and just fight through it, right? Small percentage of 10% said, we're just going to hold on. There's those that don't like change. I get it. And they're just going to hold on and pay those higher rates maybe. 3% said we don't have a plan yet. And then, the typical 1%, I don't really know. So that's just kind of an idea of what we've seen out in the market there. Any comments from anyone there on that slide?
Not yet.
All right. Thank you, Mandy. Okay, and then we dug down a little bit deeper. So we said what's important, and to kind of break this slide down, you see kind of the red, the burgundy, the reddish is businesses and customers that have more than 20 analog lines, and then the orange bar is 20 lines and less. So the reliability and uptime, I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? So when that elevator button gets pushed in your elevator car, that call needs to go through. I always say, we do a lot of these elevator cars throughout the country, and so many hotels, we meet with the building management companies and, the facilitation teams and the engineering teams. A high percentage of when that elevator car button gets pushed or that handset gets picked up, who's doing it? Middle school and high school boys. They're just messing around. And that's the God's honest truth. They push that alarm button just because they want to hear that bell ring, right? Yeah, I get in an elevator at times too, and I'm like, I used to do that as a kid. But it's so true. But if there is a true emergency, that call needs to be made. Or if somebody throws a big stone or breaks a shattered window at a retail store, that alarm needs to alert the local authorities to have them dispatch a car, that there's been a break-in into the business. So that's the reliability and uptime side of it. So high percentage there, right? Security and compliance. Are these lines, under regulatory and compliance and code? What does that mean? And I'll kind of highlight there, in a couple slides ahead. Integration with their existing technology devices, whether that is an alarm panel, a fire panel, or a security phone at a mall. We do a lot of malls throughout the country, and they need to have those lines working, so when a security issue is done, in the Macy's store that somebody's, packing in, some purses into their bag and trying to walk out, they need to alert security. That has to be done. What's the business disruption? What does the transition look like? What's the overall experience of the customer experience? That's big. CX, right? That acronym CX is huge today in our industry. Integration with future technology. How do we future proof it? Is this wireless, solution? Is this temporary? Is it really taking over? POTS have been around for, decades and decades, but is wireless the future? What is the support from the vendor? So all of these are key, components to what makes it important for a customer to make that change. All right, so the infamous Ooma air dial, there it is on the left with the two paddle antennas you see. What's really unique with us and with Ooma with this, what's called pots in a box transformation, right? That there's some competitors, again, I said early on, I'm not the only game in town, but I'll tell you why, that there's a big differentiator with Ooma. We are the only one that manufactures this device. It is made by Ooma. You open it up, you look at the back, it has our chipsets, it has our company logo. It is Ooma made, Ooma owned. We also own the software stack that drives the calls and the big features and functionality that we have with Ooma. So you see on the right all the typical applications. There's a lot more than this, 9 grid that I call it. So we talked about elevators, we talked about fire panels, we talked about security panels, PBX trunks, gate phones, blue light phones. We are seeing those not only at the college campuses, the high school campuses, all the way down to elementary schools with what's going on throughout our country. Emergency phones now in parking lots all over you see. If you see those solar panel ones that are on the two big tires, right? There's a phone that communicates out of there as well. So if there is an emergency, you don't see the traditional blue light phone that you see in the middle of the right, but you see these solar panel devices now that are temporarily put in these big parking lots. Boiler rooms, faxing, it's T38 compliant. Door entry for like a door king. So when you walk into a building, you hit a button to allow you to be on camera and to communicate with the front desk to allow you to come in. I call bat phones. Every nurse's station in hospitals and assisted living centers has to have a red light phone at the nurse's station that has to be analog line by code. We do those all throughout the country. I mean, go on and on and on down the list of what this device is made for. You see the LCD screen kind of in the middle. Shows you the 10-digit number of each line, and I'll kind of show you a larger picture of this in a couple slides again. But it just tells you a lot of information. So you could walk up to this air dial unit and get a lot of information off of it for what you're looking to do, as well as what I'll kind of uncover too in our portal that we give you the access to. Any questions on this slide?
Hey, Jason, one quick question, from Dan, why do you think people are not moving to eFax and why they're keeping their traditional old fax machines?
Yeah,
Do you
it's a
have any
great
insight on that?
Yeah, great question. So a couple different reasons why people stick with traditional faxes. So if you think of the medical world, the big one is HIPAA compliant because with the HIPAA compliance, there can't be anything stored on a server or data. It has to be just strictly a transmission of a fax. The courts, so your municipalities, your city offices, your courts still have to use traditional faxes. Now, the standard, everyday business can go to eFax and have it through the digital world by all means, but some people still in this state don't like change, and they like to physically walk up to what you see, that physical brother fax machine there, or I don't know if it's an Epson or whatever the model is, but anyway, they like to push in that 10-digit number and hit send, or they like to walk up to it and grab that 8.5 by 11 and walk back to their desk rather than having it be in an email or a PDF document. So if they want to use it just like they have today, this AirDial solution works great with that.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. What
Yeah.
about pool phones? I know like a lot of, places are starting to open their pools at apartments and different things. Can you help with that as well?
Absolutely. Yep. We do a ton of that come, as you said, springtime, which hopefully we're here sooner than later here in Michigan, right? But absolutely, we do a ton of them each year and really, help out because so many apartments, condos, townhomes forget about that. To be able to open their pool, they have to have a physical phone out there for code for emergency. And we can deploy this really, really quickly to get that up to code so they can still have their communication out there.
Great. And it looks like Robin has raised her
Robin?
hand.
Yep.
We borrow our 5 emergency lines for TTY devices, which happen to be CapTel TTY devices. Would we be able to eliminate those 5 final POTS lines? We've moved from 17 down to those 5 with Ooma.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So what this is basically just that, what I'll call it as the conduit, where that communication, that line that's eliminating whoever your existing POTS lines are with today. I'm assuming AT&T, Robin?
Um, yes, I believe that they come through our Telnet provider, but I
Yep.
believe they're originally AT&T or Frontier.
Yep. Yeah, so that's just what's called a CLEC, a competitive local exchange
Mm-hmm.
carrier. I'm very familiar with Telnet. And yes, we can absolutely, port those if you wanted to, or assign new, whatever, if you have people that, are dialing those numbers, or if it's just strictly a line, we can handle it either way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You got it. Yeah. Good questions.
I think that was it for our questions. Thanks.
Okay. Yep. And then, so we talk about compliance. So the big one that this air dial was built for is the first one you see there on the top left, the NFPA 72. So that's the National Fire Protection Agency dash 72 compliance. So it states it has to have a battery backup built into the device, which it does. And so when your building does lose power, this device will stay active. We say on white paper for 12 hours, but in almost 3.5 years this has been in market, it's been at somewhere between a 16 to 20 hour run rate from the time the power is eliminated from your building or somebody unplugs the device, which is huge. So you have, enough time for, here in Michigan, consumers and DTE, right, or the local power and gas companies, to get power back. But then, get down into the alarm panels, the elevators, the fire panels, as I talked about, HIPAA compliance, PCI compliant. We're also in there with the California State Fire Marshal and the FDNY, so the fire department, New York Fire Department, right? The FCC. I mean, and then just, all the kind of cool logos down below. So we really went to, both ends of the earth, as I say, to have this approved by federal level all the way down to local ordinance level. And I'll kind of talk quickly too on the local ordinance level. So the city of Chicago, I was born and raised in Chicago, so I have a nice affiliation with the city of Chicago. But the city of Chicago in their high rises, so if you think of what I grew up knowing it as the Sears Tower, it's now changed names. I forget whoever put their name on it now, but the high rises, like a high rise like that, or like the Hancock building in downtown, state that in their elevator cars, they cannot allow cellular communicators to be the primary way of transmission. It has to go through a WAN port through their ISP. So whether it's fiber, whether it's coax, whoever their internet service provider is, but it can fail over to cellular, to the cell SIM, and that's in the appliance for the air dial. So we can route that and provision it so they have it set up that way, which to me just makes absolutely no sense, but we can do that as well. And then I'll even take it one step further, in another slide of how we can do this for them as well. Here's a great graphic of how Ooma the AirDial operates. So we are what's called a true MFVN, so a managed facilities voice network operator. And we work with all the major cell providers in the US. So you see in the bottom, AT&T, T-Mobile, US Cellular, Verizon. We also for Canada, for our brothers across the border, I say in North America here. We work with Rogers, for example, as a cellular communicator for the Canadians there. But if you see in the kind of the where it says POTS device, so let's just say this is an alarm panel. It's an RJ11, so it's standard twisted pair that goes to the AirDial that then hits the LTE network. Let's just call it AT&T, their cage, and then within milliseconds, it makes that and transmits that call to, let's say it's ADT alarm at the alarm panel. If it gets triggered, all throughout that sub millisecond of a call. What's huge is this does not hit the public switch telephone network. This is a MFVN, a managed facilities voice network operator. So it's a private connection from our data center, from the AirDial, to the AT&T, the T-Mobile, the US Cellular, the Verizons of the world. So it is truly making a private connection for a phone call for the transmission. Any questions on that? All right. Now, because we own the software stack in this, when I was giving you that example of the high rises in Chicago, last November, so just about a year and 2 months, 3 months ago, we rolled out a software update to all AirDials that were in use, and then moving forward, ones that were ordered, had this new technology called multipath transport, and it's a patented technology that we designed, we engineered, and we pushed out over the air to all the existing, hundreds of thousands of units we had out in, 3 years already in market. So what this is if anyone understands the SD-WAN technology, the software defined WAN, so wide area network, what it's doing is when the customer's ISP, so whether let's just say it's fiber from whoever, and also let's just say we're using AT&T cellular SIM through the SIM card, it is sending packets out both ways through both the WAN port of the AirDial with the ISP, as well as through AT&T cellular, and whichever has a better connection through the data packets, it's going to send that call out actively through that route. So if one of those does fail, it prevails on the other connection without dropping that call. So it's an active packets across 2 different links. So in today's environment, if the multipath wasn't enabled and it tried to make that call out through the cellular SIM and it failed, it would have to drop that call, reestablish, dial the 10 digits, and then go back and try through the WAN port through the ISP. So that could take, 30-ish plus seconds for that call to send out. With multipath, it's active, and it's like a fail-proof connection through this route. Does that make sense to everyone? A big big differentiator there. Yeah.
Hey, Jason, one question for you is just because, we're a little bit familiar with Ooma. I think you guys have 2 SIM slots, right?
Yep.
And does that mean there's actually 3 methods of transport, or is it just one as a backup?
Yep. So there's 2 SIMs in every appliance. Slot 1 will be the active SIM, and that's going to be, let's just continue to use AT&T as the because I'm picking on them, but it's AT&T's slot active in cell slot 1. In slot 2, it's a passive SIM, and what's also known as an eSIM or a digital SIM. It'll have all the other 3 carriers in slot 2. So Verizon, US Cellular, and T-Mobile in that case. We can remotely tell the device to take it from slot 1 and activate Verizon in slot 2 if needed, which usually takes about 3 minutes for that. So it's not an active failover from slot 1 to slot 2. It's an active failover from active slot 1 to the WAN port of the ISP. And then if we do have a failure with a cellular, like say AT&T has an outage, we can then tell it to go to slot 2, activate Verizon in slot 2, and within 3 minutes have that up and running on Verizon. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So you see an active AirDial unit next to a 66 block in a customer's DMARC, or an MPO in a phone closet, basically, right? So it can be mounted, on a wall, on a shelf, in a rack, whatever fits the customer's location. We do a professional white glove installation. We'll, do the cross connect and punch down and activate that, the line or lines that's needed to come over to Ooma. Each unit supports 4 lines. You'll see kind of the back of the box on the bottom right of the screen, where you'll have port 1, port 2, 3, and 4. The WAN port that I mentioned, which would be a Cat 5 or Cat 6, an RJ45 connection that gets plugged into there. The LAN port is actually closed off. This device, we do not allow any internet access off of this device to date. Once 5G is fully deployed throughout the country, we are looking at further enhancements to allow like an internet backup off of this device. But because it is used for, fire life safety lines today, we want to ensure that those calls are being made today. And 4G and LTE gives us plenty of bandwidth for that, but we just like to just make sure. USB we use for programming provisioning when we ship this device out, so it's active and ready to go. And then you have the power supply in, the toggle switch, and
How's she doing? Oh, she's okay. She's looking exhausted though. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, I think we've asked somebody who's not on mute, Jason,
Deb?
1 quick second.
There she goes. Yep. Got it. Thank you. The GPS antenna post is if we do have to run an external antenna run for the device. Very rarely is this the case. I mean, we're looking at like sub 0.5%. In almost 3.5 years this has been in market, because we have different high gain antennas. We can deploy what you see there are the standard gain antennas. We can look at a wider paddle antenna that gives it a higher gain, a higher level of visibility, so we can hit the closest cell tower. It's usually within 1.5 miles of every business. And we look at the physical location of where each one of these sits, and that's what we'll decide when we activate and send this out from provisioning, which cellular provider to have that slot 1 active SIM in. There's a temperature gauge in this that you'll see in the portal here. I'll show you in a minute as well. There's no moving parts. It's a very rugged and industrial design and built for this. Any questions from this slide? Okay. We also have the NEMA enclosure for the National Electric manufacturing facilities that do need to have this type of a device. It's more so on the industrial side for this, but we do have this available as well. So as I mentioned, the RDM, the remote device management tool, we give the customer the keys to drive this unit for every AirDial appliance that we send out. Whether you have 1 line, 1 unit, or you have 1,000 lines and 100 units, we give you access to. You have 1 single sign-on to see all of your lines and locations and units throughout the country. Throughout North America, even if you have them. So you can remotely monitor and manage all these devices right here at your fingertips. You can add users and grant privileges. So whether you have a standard user, a super user, an editor, however you want, we give you the keys to do that as well. The great thing too is we also give you SMS and email alerts for any change of status or any calls that are made, or when you're building loses power and the air dial goes on battery backup. You'll want to know that. That's important. And then, like I said, you have that 16 to 20 hours for hopefully the local power company to get the power back on, or you can plug the unit into another external UPS battery backup as well. But you see here, it's kind of hard to see, a little bit small, right? But this is, one customer that has 3 units, so 3 air dials. And you can kind of see that they're in service, the battery status, what it's using, and then what the ports are. So if you see on the first line, the first 2 lines actually have 2 lines active, and then on the bottom one, there's 4 lines active. But lots of good information we give customers here. Here's where you can delegate, on the top left, and invite a new user. We're big on graphs, so you can single click, hey, I want to see my calls made out on this unit, for outbound or for inbound. Big graphs, you just one click visibility as I have there. Bottom left is where you set the outages and alerts for any change of status. So the device goes in service, the device is out of service, the battery's activated, the battery's below a 10% threshold, anything, an unlimited amount of emails and SMSs for those statuses. And even we'll allow you, to port your own numbers if you want. We'll do it for you, but we give you the access to do that as well. Any questions on the last 2 slides for the portal? I'll go back to the elevator example of the middle school boys or high school boys pushing buttons, that weren't truly emergency, right? So we actually had a big hotel chain throughout the country that, they're exclusively using us for this solution at all their hotels for elevators, alarms, security, fire panels, faxes, things like that. And they said, hey, it'd be great to know when elevator car 1 or elevator car 2 or elevator car 10 gets activated. We would like to know that. So we built a software into the air dial units and rolled this out throughout the entire country for all the air dials. So this is just about 3 months ago, we pushed this out to all of them. So you can go down to any individual port of any individual air dial and say, hey, when a call is made inbound or outbound, I would like to know SMS and email or either one. So we pushed that out, and this hotel chain was really happy with us that we're able to do that. So it's things like that again, we own the hardware, we own the software. We can really get creative with what we do with this unit.
Jason, is that something that is specialized to Ooma, or is that something else that others can do in the market?
Nope, we are the only one that has the capability to do this, Mandy.
That's great.
Yeah, even with the multipath, because it's a patented solution, we designed it and pushed it out with our engineering team. That is patented by Ooma and Ooma only.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. So key differentiators. Like I said, we own the hardware. It manages the software stack. We built the hardware. We developed the software. We control the supply chain. We have plenty of inventory in our warehouses throughout North America. We manage it as well through that great, RDM portal that I showed you. We're a managed facilities voice network operator. The traffic doesn't touch the public, doesn't traverse the public internet. We have our white glove professional install or self-install options. So if your engineering team knows how to do what I mentioned in this, by all means, you can do it. Active unit, with battery backup, with the MPT, there really is a fail-proof way, to allow these emergency lines to be in use. E911 as well for each individual one. So, for example, in the school, in the sled space, right? If this unit is controlling some lines for teachers on floor 201 in the northwest building, we'll get down that granular in each individual port of where, these lines are at, so that when a 911 call is placed, the emergency teams know where to go. And then the patented multipath that I talked about. I see a
Hey,
question,
Jason.
Donna. Yep.
In regards to E911 support, we have a service provider for our 911 lines. My current interest is for our non-emergency lines to replace the AT&T. Currently, our 911 service provider does have a backup phone system that our admin lines can be transferred to. But we have to be able to work with the provider to do that. Is that something that you would be able to do for us in a pinch if needed?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So you're going to forward out, off of your SIP or your UC to, let's say, this solution, and we would just need, I'm sure you have, a 911 spreadsheet, I say, of everything, and we can mirror that or walk through that with you and down that path together. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Jason, one other question. Mike
Sure.
asked, is the SMS built in or do I need a provider?
Nope, it's built in, all through us.
Thank you.
Yeah. My last slide, just, we've won so many awards over the years since we rolled this out in, it's been 3.5 years now. I always like highlighting the Ellie kind of on the bottom left there, the red one. That's like what I call the Grammy and the Emmy of like the music and movie industry. The Ellie Award is kind of a cool award in the telecom and the tech space. And we've won that. It's pretty cool. So
This is what I think the best thing about Ooma. I get pretty excited about this. So, I mean, just the fact that you can go in and you can see I'm going to steal your thunder here for a second, Jason, but you can go in and see everything live. You can get SMS notifications, but why don't you go ahead and show it off?
yeah. So this is my portal. I've got a couple obviously AirDial units I carry with me in my back pocket, I say, or in my backpack. But this is an active unit that I've labeled Thad's Garage. It's in service. I'm using multipath on it. It's plugged in. You see the full power, 100%. I said there's a temperature gauge, 75.2, degrees Fahrenheit. And then I have it tied to a fax and a test alarm. And then it actually is just registered at my headquarters out in Sunnyvale. But the question came up about SMS, so I figured I'd show you this. So I can select, any one of these at any given point for unlimited email and unlimited text messages. So I can throw in, my cell, right? So I want to be alerted, here, and I can continue to add in, multiple numbers at any point to have it sent out. So this is where the SMS comes in right here. And then, as I mentioned too, all right, let me go back to here. This is where we were talking about, we made the enhancement to, on this unit, FXS port 1 and 2 are activated. So if there was 4 ports, there's only 2, you'd see all 4. But I can also add in, so let's just say this was an elevator and I wanted any call added in, and I can add in, my email, to here, or my, phone number. Okay, makes sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep.
If somebody has interest in getting a quote, Dan, can you maybe share what they need to do for that?
Yeah, so, absolutely. I, just want to thank you, Jason. I think, as most of Abilita has been doing all things telecom for over 20 years. And I think one of the things to keep in mind, to keep track of as you go through this decision-making process, it's important to know where you're at with your contract, with your POTS. Sometimes if you can just get a renewal, that's great, but that's really just pushing it down a little bit farther, because we all know that these POTS are going to go away. And it's been great if it's reliable, if the contract's great, if it works. But I think we're coming to the end of the line for that. And of course, if you have any interest in learning more, reach out to your Abilita consultant. Because there are many choices, not just Ooma in this, but we've liked Ooma for the many things that they've showed here today. And our job is to continue to review bills, review contracts, determine ROI. And, Abilita really is moving forward to want to help our clients with strategic solutions. So we'll just wrap it up. I just want to thank everybody for attending the webinar. Just a reminder that you'll be getting a $25 gift card. I think it's through DoorDash, but you should be receiving that after this meeting, as well as a link for the recording of the call. And, like I said, our goal really here is to educate our clients and our friends on these webinars. Our next webinar is going to be in April. We'll take you through the choice of Teams or UCaaS solution when it's time to move your phone system into the cloud. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Appreciate it. And hope you guys have a great day.